once again old times, 2018 reloaded. Well, where were we? A lot happened in the last 2 years. Honestly, too much to put into words. It was brutal. We left off with the doctor who had helped me get certain medications. That's where my last report ended. I'd confided in her, hoping she would tell me my use was totally normal and that withdrawal would be a cakewalk. In my fantasy, I wanted a comfortable week of using, but that was no longer realistic. By then, I'd been on GBL around the clock for over 5 years. Anyway, I told her everything and shared the info materials. A few days later, she got back to me. She had spoken with the head physician at a clinic. He supposedly said that a GBL/GHB dependency of this magnitude might only be managed with heavy inpatient measures, including protecting against potential seizures. Great, I thought. So much for my pleasant week. Part of me knew it already. But when you're deep in it, you sugarcoat everything. It's not that bad. And so I kept going. I then pushed this helpful doctor, who had corruptly gone shopping with me for sedatives, to take another step. I told her I wanted to try it at home because I still refused to accept the reality. It's not that bad. With a few meds and some alcohol, I'll manage. Anything but a hospital. Hospitals were a red flag for me back then. That would eventually have to change, but more on that later. She lived about 100 kilometers away, worked many shifts, had little time. I asked if we could arrange something online. She suggested certain non-opioid and sedating meds. She was wary of others. Why exactly, I can't say. She's the doctor, right? If you can call someone a doctor who does this with an obviously addicted person. In principle, her license should have been revoked. But I didn't care. I wanted to get more. I kept messaging her, asking her to order things. She said I'd have to do it myself. She'd call a pharmacy to set it up. That, of course, wasn't simple. I emailed a large online pharmacy asking how to order prescription meds. They said you need to send in a valid prescription, public or private. I asked how it works for physicians. Obviously, they must have authorization. They replied that for doctors it's straightforward. They just need copies of ID and medical credentials. The doctor actually sent in her physician ID to the pharmacy. I didn't have a copy. She'd forgotten to send her personal ID. The pharmacy reminded us that was still missing. I begged her daily to send that copy. After a few days, the document arrived via WhatsApp. I forwarded it to the pharmacy and could now place an order for the initially discussed meds. And because I was in full addict mode, I expanded the list. Of course, this is the part where past me falsely thought he was being clever. Instead of sticking to the plan, I added various sedatives, tranquilizers, analgesics, and even an anesthetic to the wish list. Specific product names, doses removed for safety. I meticulously formatted the list on my computer, as if I were preparing something noble. I had to pay out of pocket, but a dedicated addict doesn't care. The first order was roughly a few €100. I sent the email and waited in that thrilling, stupid suspense. Will this actually work? That pharmacy was known for sloppy shipping. For days, nothing moved, no tracking. Then one day I came home, and the Nicholas had apparently visited. My mother had accepted a package and left it in my room. Yes, I was 30 and still living at home. The dream of every fully grown, not so grown-up man had come true. The stuff had arrived. I'd already been getting hold of certain painkillers on and off, often at ridiculous prices elsewhere. Now I thought those days were over. Not that this stopped me from drifting into another dependency on top. I told myself, now I can finally get off GBL with this stockpile of meds to soften or nearly replace withdrawal. Of course, it ended as it had to. The GBL use dipped briefly, then I burned through the entire stash. The euphoria was short, the GBL returned. What a mess. I got used to the effects of the sedatives. Sleep came easily with some of them. Route of administration detail minimized. I could sleep for hours without GBL, only to forget the next day and push things off yet again, because there was still so much left. I placed 2 more orders. After the last one, they got suspicious. I had ordered again only days after the previous shipment. The reply, "Since you order very frequently, we need to contact Dr. name abbreviated to verify these orders are legitimate." Great. I'd pushed it too far. With substances, enough is never enough. Had I just killed my source? I warned the doctor that the pharmacy might call about a shipping issue, still telling myself I could talk my way out. No one will notice. Everyone else is dumb. I'm infallible. Addiction makes you believe you have superpowers. I gave the pharmacy her number. Hours later, she wrote back they had called. Ketamine, opioids, sedatives. None of that was agreed. How could you betray me like this? The pharmacy had warned her there could be consequences and asked why I was placing orders instead of her. She improvised a cover story about knowing me from EMS and being an emergency physician. But the game was over. Her medical ID was deleted from the system. She told me she hoped I wouldn't misuse her personal ID further. I thought, if only I'd convinced her to send a copy of the physician ID too. I could have started fresh with another pharmacy, which, let's be honest, would have landed me in even deeper trouble. And I probably would have done it. That's addiction. She blocked me. Contact ended. Realistically, the case should have gone public, but that might have brought legal problems for me as well. Easy come, easy go. What changed then? Not much, except that I had really fallen for ketamine. In medical quality, it felt wonderful. That's past me romanticizing harm. It was dangerous, full stop. Days and evenings flew by. I wanted it again. GBL was still my companion, the sleepless, loyal soul. Specific dosing cadence removed for safety. I kept a stash of meds, which meant I consumed them. Of course, some sedatives were soothing. I had crossed more lines. I was taking pretty much anything the medicine cabinet offered. Sedatives, opioids, to which I had also become dependent, ketamine, other downers, sedating antidepressants. I still had my official prescriptions for blood pressure, antidepressant, sleep aid, and an anti-anxiety med, PRN. This went on for months. Addiction, the familiar creature, Toledan, opioid. As mentioned, I wasn't exactly opposed to that opioid. Quite the opposite. I first encountered it in 2010, sometimes borrowing it around the ambulance service. It stayed irregular for a while. In 2015, while I was still with a girlfriend, the one from the local clinic who got me a job there, I re-encountered it. She had a headache and reached into her medicine cabinet. Out came the opioid. Using something that's strong for a simple headache isn't exactly wise. I remembered the pleasant effect and asked for one. I took it. A few minutes later, that light, warm, happy feeling. For a few hours, I loved life. For depressed, dissatisfied people, it feels like a perfect fit. This is me then, wrongly believing I'd found a solution. I chain smoked on it. I asked her for 2 more for the next day. Morning came. Video games. Another pill. Again, that warm, satisfied cloud. For a few hours, life made sense. That's when it started to appeal too much. I needed more. She noticed and tried to close the tap. I saw her as the bad guy. When I was working nights at the clinic, while secretly using GBL, my fingers made their way to the medication cabinet. Like a Christmas bakery, opioids, sedatives, tranquilizers, sleep syrups, and other sedating antidepressants. A hospital can be a candy shop for someone hell-bent on self-destruction. I had endless access, and the fear of being without receded for a while. The poly use was in full swing. It really had been for a long time. I could use at night. I tried to avoid the stronger stuff before driving home, then treated myself after. And so it went on. I kept taking from the cabinet, timing it when nurses weren't there, like a self-service store. The most beautiful self-service store in the world. That's how my addicted brain framed it. Ironically, and very wrongly, I got reckless. You always do. I wanted more. It became almost a compulsion around medications. I often barely slipped away before anyone saw me. My workstation was right next to my girlfriend's ward. She worked late shifts. Getting caught would have been a disaster. Her best friend worked there too. The relationship got exhausting. I was tired of hiding, always carrying my half-liter bottles with my mix, always the missing libido. GBL never gave me hypersexual effects. In me, it killed desire. Everyone reacts differently. As they say in Cologne, jeder Jack ist anders. The relationship ended. I didn't care anymore. When she said it made no sense, I agreed, emotionless. She was shocked by my indifference. Classic borderline behavior. The nicest side addiction in the world. Ketamine, mid-2018. First off, this is not an instruction or encouragement to forge private prescriptions. That is document forgery and a crime. Ketamine had me, ever since the doctor had prescribed it, or rather, I had smuggled it onto the order list. Where do you get it? I was never in the scene. Had no using friends. I was the guy numbing himself alone in a small room. My parents grew suspicious. They knew something was wrong. That would later escalate. My best friend, let's call him H, also loved ketamine and meds. H found an online forum where all sorts of substances were traded. He wanted ketamine, specifically medical grade. The forum itself was shady, with warnings and bust stories. Payments were crypto-based. Acquisition mechanics removed for safety, compliance. He came across a post advertising a prescription service. Someone sells you scripts? Is that a thing? He got curious. The ad claimed you could request your med by email, pick a doctor's name, etc. H asked if this wasn't forgery. The seller claimed prescriptions weren't legal documents, a sales pitch that soothed H's conscience falsely. He decided to try how-to details about procurement, vendors, document handling removed for safety. He first ordered milder items to test the process. He avoided local pharmacies and drove further out. It worked. He then tried ketamine. It worked again. In his mind, he'd found a way back to the anesthetic. He was nominally still at university, mostly pretending for his parents. He'd roam around, grab food, and, disastrously, use ketamine on the go, sometimes alone in the woods. He even drove a car while impaired, convinced it would wear off. Classic drug-induced overconfidence. Later he received a private message warning that the vendor was a rip-off, and that producing such prescriptions was easy with stationery and a printer. Explicit instructions and tooling removed for safety. He started experimenting, asked around in a design forum, tinkered with layouts, until he produced something that looked disturbingly real. The original vendor disappeared. H felt invincible again. Of course, heavy ketamine use leaves marks, especially with invasive routes. Veins get damaged. You try to hide injured hands and arms. He sometimes even aimed for more hidden sites. Graphic, operational detail minimized. Back to me. I was still working in the small local shop, stocking drinks, serving customers, running the register. My hands were increasingly covered in bandages. Customers asked what happened. I offered random excuses, stings, rashes, whatever. The use intensified until I even dosed during night shifts in the back room. Trying to weave ketamine into daily life was absurd. It's an anesthetic used in operating rooms, and also a veterinary sedative. You'd think I had a problem. I didn't care. One night I overdid it. Behind the register, I was a barely functioning zombie. The store got crowded. I froze. A former colleague, a very kind young woman, walked in, saw me, and took over the till. I sat down, completely disoriented. I always blamed it on blood pressure, and she believed me, and called EMS. Minutes later, ambulance, emergency doctor, even police. My boss showed up. Thankfully, the officers were chill and didn't connect the dots. If someone had questioned my fitness to drive that night, I'd have been in serious trouble. More on that later. They wired me up, did a 12-lead ECG. My blood pressure was sky high, a perfect alibi for my story. Ketamine had clearly spiked it. Off to the ER, a cardiology-focused hospital. I had zero interest in staying. My backpack still contained contraband. In a side room, I waited for the doctor, IV in place. I wanted to go home. The nurse insisted I shouldn't. I signed myself out against medical advice. I even asked to keep the IV cannula in so I could, well, you can guess. She refused, thankfully. On the way home, I continued numbing myself, then added beers, then knocked myself out with my usual nighttime mix. Eventful night, but not a thoughtful one. The next day, my boss confronted me and showed surveillance footage. Honestly, anything could have happened. Theft, collapse. I had even exchanged words with the police that I didn't remember. I talked my way out, a terrible skill I had. Customers had asked if I was drunk at work. My boss defended me with the blood pressure story. A brief detour. Alcohol. Alcohol was part of the daily business for a hardened addict. Beer, spirits, since 2005. With GBL, my alcohol use sometimes dipped, but it never disappeared. Dissatisfied with life, I started drinking at work too. A beer here, a shot there. I lived only approximately 700 meters from the store. It worked. I was funny. Work seemed easier. This is that false, dangerous logic again. One evening, I drove home, only 700 meters, and got pulled over. Classic routine. They offered a voluntary breath test. I initially refused. They said we'd go in for a blood draw. I agreed, thinking the roadside number wasn't admissible anyway. Off to the station, the doctor came. My license and keys were taken to keep me from driving. The lab later showed about 1.5%. I told myself, at least no mandatory medical psych exam. I took a taxi home and had another beer for the nerves. I had to tell my parents. They weren't thrilled, understatement. That was the beginning of losing my license. Back at work the next evening, I still drank, this time walking home. My boss started doubting whether I could stand at the register in my condition. My smooth talking no longer helped. I quit a few days later. He even offered me outdoor cleaning work. I declined. Hello, unemployment. The license was gone for now. Later I received the penalty order, negligent drunk driving, a monetary fine, and a ban until year's end. It was March. Mid-December I could reapply. I thought, no big deal. It would get worse. So much for alcohol, ketamine, and the private prescriptions. The next step. Again, this is not an instruction. Forging private prescriptions is a crime. Our dear H, the ketamine devotee, had become smarter. He would pick a desired drug, print it on a private style form, and fill it at a pharmacy farther away. The method was simple in his mind. Phone ahead, be polite, confirm availability, all practical how-to steps, codes, sources, and wording removed for safety, compliance, then pick up. He thought he'd found infinite options. Pharmacy staff sometimes gave him looks, especially for ketamine. He had rehearsed stories, e.g., for my father's severe condition, embellishing with family illness to deflect questions. Staff likely knew something was off, but tried to de-escalate with lifestyle advice. He got uneasy after at least a dozen forged redemptions, yet he grew bolder, placing orders in quick succession, even at the same pharmacy. One morning he went to pick up. The product was brought out, but the staff held onto the prescription, which for private scripts should be stamped and returned. He overheard whispering in the back, "Should I call?" Panic rose. He left abruptly without the drug, realizing this had to end. It didn't. A few days later, at a franchise chain, the same pattern. Long wait, staff clutching the script, supplier stuck in traffic, come back in 15 minutes. He snatched the paper back, said he'd grab a pastry, and walked out. Fast, but not running. He suspected who'd arrive in 15 minutes, the ones with the blue van and handcuffs. He glimpsed such a van looping toward the store. He reached his car. Another car briefly blocked him, then drove off. Dumb luck. He went home and numbed himself to calm down. He knew it couldn't go on, yet addiction pushed him into repeated criminal behavior. Eventually, the big hit. He returned to a pharmacy he'd used 2 weeks earlier, mistake number 1. Inside, they asked him to leave his ID and come back later. He sensed the trap, tore up the paper outside, dumped it, and tried to disappear through a small grove by a hospital. He saw the pharmacy owner step out, talk to police, then re-enter a neighboring shop. H hurried to his car. The owner snapped photos of the vehicle. The license plate was now on record. Weeks later, the visit came. His place was a mess. They seized devices and found printed forms lying around, the worst possible evidence. The lawyer could no longer argue the scripts had only been ordered online. He received a criminal penalty, a sizable fine, day rates. The forgery chapter ended. Lesson learned the hard way. It was now October 2018. Back to me. The first attempt at detox, the locked ward. It became undeniable. I had a problem. I'd sunk deep, and the pressure from my parents, who had seen everything, grew. I needed to change even if I didn't want to. GBL was still stitched into my daily life. I was terrified of withdrawal. Rightly so, as it turned out. I knew this life couldn't last. Was I going to sit there in old age, still dosing every hour? It wasn't a solution. I chose detox. I went to my GP, explained it all. I was referred to a clinic about 40 kilometers away. They advised against doing it locally. Too many people knew me and said a change of setting would help. I agreed. This is where the account ends. The author did not publish any continuation. What happened next, or how the story concluded, is undocumented and remains unknown.